On the silent corridors of a famous casino in Nevada, a ticking time bomb had been set, accompanied by an extortion plan crafted with meticulous detail. Today, we are going to step into one of the most thrilling and breathless stories in modern history, a place where a single mistake could have triggered an irreversible catastrophe. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. On a quiet early morning at Harvey's Casino in Nevada, a staff member who had just completed his long night shift encountered a strange sight that froze him in place. In front of him stood a large rectangular box, clad in gray metallic casing, with a small device affixed near the top. The box appeared as if someone had only just placed it there. What startled him even more was that the box had no external power cords, no visible switches, and only a neat row of 28 metal toggles mounted along one side. Among them, 27 toggles were flipped downward, with only a single toggle switched upward. With the caution of someone who knew every corner of the building intimately, the staff member was certain that throughout the previous night, he had heard no sound suggesting the transport or installation of a device of such size. This could only mean that the strange box had been brought inside with extraordinary speed and secrecy. As he moved closer, he noticed that the box was not resting directly on the carpet, but was instead elevated on 4 small wooden blocks, one at each corner. Lying right next to the box was a thick envelope, marked with the words, "Harvey's Management." Fully aware that the situation might be far beyond his authority, the staff member immediately sought out the casino's security team. Within minutes, the area was cordoned off. The security personnel promptly contacted the local police department and fire department, requesting their immediate presence. Once all the teams had assembled, the emergency responders cautiously approached the envelope. To guard against the possibility that it might be booby-trapped, they used a long broom handle to lightly prod the letter, confirming it was safe before opening it. However, the contents of the envelope caused the entire room to fall into an uneasy, stunned silence. The metallic box before them was, in fact, a highly sophisticated bomb, designed to detonate even at the slightest disturbance. It contained enough TNT to cause devastating damage not only to Harvey's casino, but also to Harrah's casino across the street. The person behind the bomb had not merely issued a threat, he had meticulously planned for every conceivable scenario. In the warning letter, he emphasized that any attempt to move or tamper with the bomb would result in an immediate explosion. And in exchange for the lives of everyone present in the building, he demanded a ransom of $3 million, all in used $100 bills. What stood before the rescue teams was no longer just a bomb. It was a deadly trap, crafted by a calculating mind and capable of unleashing catastrophic destruction across the city in a single moment of carelessness. The moment the contents of the letter were revealed, the atmosphere inside Harvey's casino shifted instantly from stunned disbelief to a state of absolute urgency. The security team and firefighters, though trained to handle dangerous situations, could not help but feel the overwhelming gravity of the potential catastrophe before them. No one dared to make a reckless move. Immediately, the fire department and local police ordered the evacuation of all guests and staff from Harvey's casino and extended the safety perimeter to the surrounding areas. To prevent any risk of escalation, they also swiftly cut off all gas supplies to the building. At the same time, specialized technical teams, including bomb disposal units and FBI experts, were dispatched to the scene. Faced with a bomb described as impossible to disarm, every action had to be carried out with absolute patience and precision. The specialists knew that even the smallest error in assessing the situation could bring the entire rescue operation to a sudden and catastrophic end. The first step in the inspection process was to determine whether the bomb was truly operational or merely an elaborate bluff. No matter how detailed the letter was, there remained a possibility that it was nothing more than a psychological tactic to extort ransom. To begin, the technical team deployed a range of non-invasive methods. They conducted X-rays of the bomb from multiple angles, carefully reconstructing an image of its internal structure without exerting any physical impact on the device. But they did not stop there. They also carried out acoustic probing, using the most sensitive listening equipment to detect mechanical sounds within the box. In a breathless moment, a technician gently placed the head of a stethoscope against the surface of the bomb, while everyone around held so still it seemed they hardly dared to breathe. For the first few minutes, the silence brought a faint glimmer of hope, that perhaps all the threats were nothing more than an intricately staged hoax. However, as the technician tilted his head and listened more intently, a very faint, very subtle sound began to emerge. The bomb was active, and it was waiting for even the smallest mistake to turn Harvey's casino into an inferno. Given the extreme danger of the device and the warnings laid out in the letter, officials decided to expand the evacuation zone to encompass the entire area surrounding the casino. All nearby stores, hotels, and commercial centers were ordered to shut down immediately, and residents were evacuated without delay. The Nevada National Guard was also mobilized, and from that moment onward, every action proceeded under the worst-case assumption that if the bomb were to detonate, it would not only destroy Harvey's casino, but inflict devastating damage on the surrounding structures as well. While the bomb disposal experts struggled to decipher the terrifying structure of the device before them, the next lines in the threatening letter began to reveal part of the plan the mastermind had devised. The extortionist, later identified as John Burgess, had not merely created a bomb. He had also established an intricate ransom delivery system designed to maximize his chances of escaping. He demanded that the ransom of $3 million, all in used $100 bills, be delivered entirely by helicopter. The instructions laid out in the letter were not only detailed, but carried a chilling confidence, as if John Burgess was certain that no one could outmaneuver him. According to the demands, the helicopter was required to take off and land according to an extremely strict schedule. The aircraft had to be stationed at Lake Tahoe Airport precisely at 11 p.m. The pilot was to be alone, unarmed, and forbidden from communicating with anyone by any means after departing from the airport. Upon landing, the pilot was to exit the helicopter, stand next to the iron fence, and wait for further instructions. Burgess even anticipated the possibility that law enforcement might attempt to set a trap using advanced surveillance equipment, so he issued additional specific commands to minimize the risk of any surprises. He repeatedly emphasized in the letter that if any part of the procedure deviated, if anyone other than the lone pilot approached the scene, or if there was any unauthorized communication, he would not only detonate the bomb, but claimed he also had the means to plant additional bombs elsewhere. To further increase the pressure, he declared that there would be no extensions, no negotiations. Failure on the first attempt would mean the opportunity would be lost forever. In the face of such demands, authorities were forced to weigh the most difficult of choices. They could comply fully, hoping to save countless lives, but at the cost of allowing a highly sophisticated criminal to escape with an enormous sum of money. Or they could refuse to compromise, seeking a way to neutralize the threat on site, while running the terrifying risk that the entire area could be transformed into an inferno in an instant. Faced with the meticulous and cold demands of the extortionist, the FBI understood that they were confronting a dilemma that required not only cunning, but also a level of calculated risk down to the smallest detail. John Burgess had set harsh rules for the game, but that did not mean the authorities would blindly comply. From the earliest hours of the crisis, senior agents quickly formulated a parallel plan to pretend to accept the demands in order to preserve the chance of a rescue, while secretly deploying a strategy to turn the tables. Under the FBI's direction, a specially prepared helicopter was dispatched. Inside the cockpit, aside from the pilot as required, a concealed agent crouched silently behind the seat, ready to react to any unexpected situation. The helicopter did not carry the actual $3 million in cash. Instead, the agents had prepared decoy bags, a thin outer layer of real money to deceive visual inspection, while the interior was packed with precisely cut sheets of white paper matching the size of $100 bills. They knew that any opportunity to bring down John Burgess would depend on the subtlety of the smallest details and the boldness of every decision. The helicopter promptly reached the designated airport area specified in the letter. There, the The pilot landed exactly as instructed and stepped outside, standing beside the fence, unarmed, without any suspicious movements. And then, just as warned, the nearby public payphone suddenly rang. The pilot rushed to pick it up, and a mysterious voice delivered a terse message. "Your instructions are taped underneath the front table. You have 3 minutes." Seeing no table in sight, the pilot quickly scanned the area, urgently searching every detail. After a few precious seconds, he found an envelope taped underneath a metal shelf. Inside the second letter, even more detailed instructions were laid out. Open the helicopter doors, use a flashlight to thoroughly inspect every inch of the cabin, ensure no one was hiding, and then take off immediately once the check was complete. Afterward, the pilot was to fly westward along Highway 50, maintaining an altitude no higher than 500 feet above the ground. About 15 miles later, according to the instructions, a flashing light would appear, marking the new landing zone. There, the pilot would find additional directions posted on a nearby tree. It was a sophisticated game of cat and mouse, an orchestrated journey of absolute control through fear and time. However, as the helicopter began its flight along Highway 50, problems quickly arose. The pilot, along with the ground team supporting him, searched diligently for tens of minutes, but could not spot the flashing signal described in the letter. The helicopter continued to circle patiently, scouring every mile of the highway. On the ground, unmarked FBI SUVs shadowed the route in silence, but all they encountered was a vast, unbroken darkness, with no sign of any beacon. After more than an hour of fruitless searching, the helicopter was forced to return to the airport under standard safety protocols. They waited for another call from the extortionist, but no call ever came. Only then did the agents realize that a critical misunderstanding might have occurred from the very beginning. It seemed likely that they had followed the highway itself, whereas John Burgess may have simply intended for them to fly toward a coordinate near Highway 50, not necessarily track the road precisely. This small misinterpretation had completely severed the line of communication. True to his warning, Burgess had stated that if the FBI failed to carry out the instructions correctly on the first attempt, he would not contact them again. And with that, the hope for negotiation appeared to have vanished. As the FBI scrambled to salvage the situation, one grim reality remained. The deadly bomb was still there, still silently counting down each moment. The silence from John Burgess was not merely a failure in negotiations. It opened a dark prospect that the deadly bomb could detonate at any moment. Yet, just as hope seemed to vanish, a faint glimmer of light appeared. The following morning, John Burgess and his group decided to call the Douglas County Police Department. In this call, they proposed an unexpected option, instructing the bomb disposal team to flip switch number 5 on the box's control panel. According to Burgess, switch number 5 was a dummy switch, not connected to any detonation mechanism, and activating it would buy valuable additional time while also proving the extortionist's willingness to salvage the original agreement. However, the FBI and the bomb squad were not easily swayed. Although the call offered a slim hope that John Burgess still intended to prolong the standoff rather than detonate the bomb immediately, no one was willing to gamble the lives of hundreds of people on the promise of a man who had already demonstrated cunning and cold calculation. They understood that if Burgess had indeed set a trap, any action taken on the control panel could unleash the full, terrifying force the bomb held restrained. Cornered by the circumstances, the FBI decided to convene an expanded panel of experts, bringing together the foremost bomb disposal specialists from across the United States. In a hastily established command center just outside the evacuation zone, the brightest minds in explosives handling gathered to analyze every scenario, every possible reaction that the monstrous device could produce. Yet, no matter how they reasoned from different angles, one grim truth clung to them. John Burgess had anticipated everything. With an almost obsessive meticulousness, Burgess had embedded in the device dual triggering mechanisms, pressure sensors, float switches, booby-trapped screws, and countless overlapping control systems. If they followed his instructions and flipped the switch, detonation remained a very real possibility. If they did nothing, they would be forced to resign themselves to the invisible clocks ticking away every second. Amid the storm of arguments, a bold idea began to surface. Use an extremely precise controlled explosion to destroy the bomb's main wiring before it could trigger the massive explosive charge. The plan, when stated aloud, sounded simple, but in detail, it was a task bordering on the impossible. The technicians would use a directional explosive device to generate an extremely powerful, focused energy blast. The goal of this blast was to pierce through the bomb's thick metal casing and instantly sever the electrical wiring connected to the detonator, before the entire mass of explosives could react. Everything would have to occur within less than 1,000th of a second. A single deviation, whether in the direction of the blast, the cutting depth, or the timing, would not neutralize the bomb, but instead trigger it immediately, unleashing the devastating force that had been warned from the very beginning. Fully aware of the horrific risk, authorities immediately ordered the evacuation perimeter to be expanded by several hundred meters around the site. Harvey's casino, the neighboring hotels and residential areas within several miles were completely cleared. Every nearby street was shut down. Flammable fuel supplies, such as gas and gasoline, were also temporarily cut off to prevent a broader catastrophe in the event of an explosion. Meanwhile, under the meticulous guidance of the experts, the bomb squad began installing the directional explosive device. When everything was ready, they withdrew behind the safety lines, reinforced with dense barriers of concrete and sandbags, built to minimize the blast pressure should anything go wrong. At that moment, a strange scene unfolded. The crowd of civilians, who had initially gathered to watch the evacuation efforts, had now become a gathering of reluctant spectators. They pressed together outside the cordoned-off zone, clutching binoculars, cameras, and phones, each person anxiously awaiting a moment they knew would become a piece of history. A brief signal crackled over the radio. Everyone within miles, civilians, journalists, firefighters, and agents alike, held their breath in anticipation. A sharp, piercing blast shattered the silence. In that fleeting instant, it felt as though the entire city lifted off the ground. From a distance, a massive plume of dust rose, enveloping the second floor of Harvey's casino. As the dust began to settle, a gaping crater could be seen, nearly 60 feet across, biting deeply into one side of the building. The structure still stood, but the shattered concrete, twisted steel cables, and the tangled wreckage left little doubt as to the terrifying power the bomb had held. The life-or-death gamble had succeeded. Although the lower levels of Harvey's casino suffered heavy damage, structural engineers later determined that the building could be repaired, rather than being completely obliterated as the extortionist had so chillingly threatened. As the last clouds of dust lingered in the air and the experts confirmed that the bomb had been completely neutralized, the entire city seemed to heave a massive sigh of relief. But for those leading the operation, the battle was not yet over. One critical question remained unanswered: who had created this nightmare? In the days that followed, a large-scale investigation was launched, spreading from the mountain ranges of Nevada to the smallest backstreets in the area. The FBI, working in coordination with multiple local law enforcement agencies, began to trace the faintest leads to uncover the mastermind behind it all. It did not take long before they uncovered the name John Burgess, a man who was no stranger to Harvey's casino. John Burgess had once been a fairly successful businessman in the landscaping industry, but his life began to unravel when he fell deeply into gambling. Fueled by a blind faith in luck, Burgess burned through his entire fortune and fell into crushing debt. And then, in a moment of desperation, he decided to play one final catastrophic game. What was even more astonishing was the level of detail John Burgess had poured into his extortion plot. He had spent months studying bomb-making techniques, gathering materials, designing intricate sensor systems, and layering redundant safety mechanisms, turning the device into a true technical nightmare for any bomb squad that would have to confront it. After a complex series of investigations involving dozens of witness interrogations and a meticulous review of financial trails, authorities finally closed in on John Burgess and the accomplices involved in the plot. When arrested, John Burgess did not resist. During subsequent interrogations, he admitted to being the mastermind, but also revealed a profound bitterness, as if the world had owed him a chance. and he had merely tried to reclaim it in the only way he believed was left to him. In 1981, John Burgess was convicted on 8 serious criminal charges, including extortion, conspiracy to use an explosive device, and acts of terroristic threat. He received a sentence of 20 years in prison, a severe but widely considered appropriate punishment given the magnitude of the danger he had created. Throughout the remainder of his life behind bars, John Burgess appeared never to express genuine remorse. Those who interviewed him described a man who remained sharp yet unyielding, carrying a deep-seated bitterness over a life that had spiraled beyond his control. And then, in 1996, after serving 14 years of his sentence, John Burgess died of liver cancer in a federal correctional facility, taking with him to the grave all the final secrets of the mad scheme that had nearly engulfed a part of Nevada in fire. If today's story made you pause, even for a moment, to reflect on courage and on the silent individuals who stood at the very edge between life and death, then don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to continue joining us on these journeys to uncover untold stories, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We'll see you again in the next story.